All right. So this is our last class meeting of the semester, and a week from today, you'll have 13 minutes left to complete the exam. So you'll be hopefully finished, and if not, you'll be pretty close to finished. I have written the exam now. I know what's on it. I'm not going to tell you what's on it, but it's pretty wide-ranging from the beginning of the semester to the end, including some questions from our class meeting on Wednesday. So my recommendation in terms of ways to study is review those in-class exercises, review the homework, and just think about what are the different types of problems that you've solved this semester. And I'll refresh your memory that I've kind of already summarized that for you because we've got a course schedule. And if you go to the course schedule, you can see the topic of every lecture that we've had this semester. Let me just find that briefly, and let's look at this schedule together. So you can go back and just, make a checklist and say to yourself, do I already understand how to use LCM? Yeah, that was easy. But then, do you understand early termination versus contract services? No? Maybe spend a few moments refreshing that. Think about bonds. Do you know how to value a bond? If not, review that one. So I would recommend going through this schedule of the semester and just checking it and using this as a resource for how to review your understanding of different topics. And so as I had promised, there are proportionally more questions and more points on the material since the second midterm exam. So, that's the stuff that's more recent and more fresh in your mind, and you haven't been tested on it. So probably you're going to be doing fine on that anyway. But I did just want to give you those suggestions for beginning your review, that I think that this course schedule is a good resource for refreshing your memory on what to do. So does anybody have questions about the final exam? It's going to be the same thing where you need to start with the blank workbook when you use a spreadsheet to solve a problem. You can't use previously solved examples or homeworks for that. I've clearly indicated which problems you shouldn't use Excel for. And so anyways, we got a week. Today we're going to continue talking about personal finance and investing, and specifically I'm going to do something a little bit uncomfortable, and discussions of money are sometimes awkward and taboo because some people just find it an awkward subject to discuss, and we tend to be private about those sorts of financial details. But I thought there would be value in you seeing what a brokerage account looks like. So I'm going to actually show you my son's college savings account. So you're going to see what stocks are in his savings account, how that's allocated, things like lot details we're going to look at. So I'll stop the recording when I do that. I don't necessarily want all of that posted on YouTube. But I think maybe demystifying what seems like a really complicated subject, the idea of having your own brokerage account, maybe seems out of reach until you see actually it's pretty simple. It's similar to a checking account in a lot of ways. So I'm going to pull that up, and then we're going to discuss a little bit more about budgeting. So let me pause the recording here as we log on to the Charles Schwab website. All right. So let's talk a little bit about budgeting. And I was browsing a few sites today, and I found one, howtomoney.com, that had some interesting ideas for different budget types that I've unknowingly used over the years. I mean, it's just approaches that I'd taken without it being formal, just kind of maybe improvising, came across these ideas. And the first way to budget that this site recommended, it says the newbie, somebody who's just now starting to think seriously about money-related things, maybe when you graduate you'll be facing that situation, is a 50-30-20 budget. And the suggestion is that you should limit your needs to only half of your take-home pay. And you may think that, well, you can't really control that in every case. And it's possible that, for example, you're already spending more, or when you graduate, you will be spending more on your mortgage and transportation and groceries and so on. So these are needs, but just because they're needs, that doesn't mean that you have to spend whatever it costs. Like, it is possible to economize, and especially in the case of transportation. So many people will overspend on transportation because they want a new car, and they kind of lie to themselves that, oh, I'm getting a new car because it's more fuel efficient and I'll save money on gas. And so they'll buy like a $45,000 Prius instead of continuing to drive their $5,000 Ford that still runs fine, and it's maybe burning a little bit more gas, but it would be almost impossible to burn enough gas to justify buying a new vehicle just for improvements in fuel economy. But the overall point is that all of these things are necessities, but you don't have to necessarily live in the biggest house that you can afford. And their recommendation is to limit the things that you absolutely need to be alive and healthy to 50% of your take-home pay. And then the next priority after that is saving 20% of your take-home pay. And so that could include not just putting it into a savings account, but it could be thinking about putting it into a brokerage, or when you're paying off debt, that's maybe the most valuable thing that you can do, because debt typically charges a higher interest rate than you'll earn in a savings account. So it's very valuable to pay off your debt. Now, maybe you shouldn't just pay off your debt. Maybe you should do both. Put some money into a brokerage account, some money into paying off debt, because you want to have a cushion of funds in case the unexpected happens. And if you're just paying off your debts, then you're not creating that cushion of funds that would allow you to live without worry during a period of difficulty. So after these two, paying off the needs and putting some money towards your savings, then the recommendation is the remaining 30% is what you just use for the fun things in life, for going to restaurants and going on trips and buying toys and so on. So this 50-30-20 approach is a good place to start. And like how the mechanics of how it would actually work, obviously you'd need to keep track of spending in those categories to know what are your needs, and you'd need to figure out like how they vary over time, because utility bills, for example, may be radically different in January, where you're burning a lot of gas, compared to July, when you're maybe using a lot of electricity but burning very little gas. So this is the newbie budget method. Now, there's a separate technique that's suggested for people who find that they overspend or that they're running out of money before the end of the month. And the envelope budgeting is just the idea that what you should do is you should split up your paycheck into different envelopes. And that starts by identifying the categories of variable recurring spending. So like your rent money, you wouldn't necessarily have to put that in an envelope. I mean, it's just a lump sum payment that comes through once a month, so it doesn't need its own envelope. And maybe the same thing is true of your car payment. It wouldn't need to go into an envelope because it only happens once a month. The idea of the envelope is putting money in there that you'd be tempted to spend more than you should. So think about if you're going to restaurants or you're buying clothing, the things that maybe they're necessities, maybe they're not necessities, but you know how much you want to spend and you know what your limit is. And so what you'd do is you'd put an allocated amount of cash into that envelope. And this is important, that it's actually cash money in the envelope. And then over time, as you spend that cash, you'd either use the envelopes, the cash that was in the envelope, or if you put some money on, if you made a payment on your credit card, for example, then you'd move an equivalent amount of money from that envelope's category into a separate one that you're going to pay the bill with, so that you're always seeing how much money is left in the envelope. And that physical reminder of how much you've spent so far and how much is remaining would naturally moderate your spending. As you saw it start to go down, you'd prioritize, you'd economize, and then you really have to have the discipline to, once the money is gone from the envelope, to not start using money from other envelopes, because at the beginning of the month you'd already kind of made the commitment to yourself how much you were going to spend in each category, and then you can reshape the priorities for the following month after that. So this is a good technique to develop discipline. It's a way for it to be less abstract. Money's so abstract in itself, but it's even more abstract when all you're using is a plastic credit card and it just seems like there's an unlimited amount on there. So the idea of the envelope budgeting is to make it more visible how much you've spent and how much you should spend in each category. Now, you'd need to combine this with some of the thinking from the 50-30-20. Like in the envelope budgeting, you don't want to neglect saving, and so you should also set aside a certain amount of money each month. If you're doing the envelopes, it's just the envelopes is maybe for the combination of 50 and 30. But don't ever forget about the need to pay yourself through saving money. Zero-based budgeting is a technique that is sometimes called the type A budget. Somebody who is just fixated on every detail and they want to know down to the dollar where did every dollar go. And the way that it works is you'd start with your monthly income and you'd track every single expenditure through the month. And so putting it into a spreadsheet or using software that tells you for every dollar what it went to. And this is just another way, similar to the envelopes, of making your spending visible and focusing on the details. Because when you focus on the details and you look at how much spending went into each category, and then if there is any money left over at the end of the month, then you'd assign it to a purpose, because it's called zero-based budgeting because you truly want to have zero money left at the end of the month. So it should all be allocated. And what this approach does is it focuses on the value of money, the idea that money has a job, that the money doesn't just exist for its own purpose, that you are the master of the money, and so you're using it to solve problems. So you're using your money to solve the problem of you're hungry, or you're cold, or you need clothing, or you have to pay your tuition. And so you are the manager of the money, and some of that would also be you're putting it towards savings because you've got these financial goals for the future. So that's kind of the idea behind the zero-based budgeting approach, with the goal is just to have no money left because you've already allocated it to do something that's valuable to you. And so this is a way to investigate what are your priorities. And in all of these budget methods, it's important to go through the planning process, not because you're always going to follow the plan perfectly, but it's the planning process that helps you to learn about yourself and what your priorities are. And so that's really the value of planning, is just to look at the possibilities that can arise and go through the kind of values familiarization process. Here's the last one. It's the budget of having no budget. And the no budget is built on the idea that what you do is you pay yourself first, and then all of the leftover money is just whatever you want to do with it. So the way that you pay yourself first is by setting up an automatic withdrawal from your checking account to a brokerage or savings account. Or another way to do it is a lot of employers would allow you to split up your outgoing paycheck to more than one account. Like here at Marshall, for example, they'll let you send your paycheck, I think, to 5 different accounts. I've only split it up to 2 before. But what you could do is you could say, send 20% of my paycheck to Charles Schwab and 80% of my paycheck to Huntington Bank. And then that 20% that's going to Charles Schwab is your savings. And then what you do on top of that is you'd set up all of your bills to auto pay so that you don't have to manually pay for things like your mortgage payment or your car payment or the utilities. Those are just kind of like automatically taken out of your account each month, so that anything that's left at the end of the auto bill pay and after already having an automatic savings plan is the money that you are allowed to spend on whatever is important to you. So I think that the no budget is maybe more of the advanced technique. And the website How to Money suggested that this is probably best for people who are relatively high earning, where their checking account balance isn't going to drop near zero each month, where they would need to keep a couple of $1,000s in the account at all times, and you're just trying to keep it in that couple of $1,000s range. And so that pool or that cushion of money is absorbing the auto bill pay, and it's absorbing the automatic withdrawals, and you're just trying to keep it level over time. So anything that would be left over is yours to spend. So I think budgeting is worthwhile, and it's because money is for solving problems, and you shouldn't waste it because you're going to be working so hard for it, and you've gone to a lot of trouble in college, and you're putting yourself through the ringer in a sense to get your education and be qualified for the jobs that you're going to do later. So you really need to respect the effort that you've put into accumulating your money and making sure that it is spent on things that are a high priority to you. So just in the few minutes that are left, here's some other things that I thought of related to achieving financial success. And I think one of the ways that I've been able to save a fair amount of money in my life is that I'm perfectly happy with things that are not perfect. Like a car that has some scratches on it, I don't really care. I've got a receiver, like a stereo receiver in my basement. It's 15 years old, and during the winter, I don't know why, but in the winter, when I turn it on, if it's cold in the basement, it takes 4 or 5 minutes before the HDMI will actually start passing the video through. But am I going to spend another $900 on a new receiver? No, I don't care. I'm just going to save the money, and if you tolerate things that are okay but not perfect, then the money that you didn't spend on replacing those things is like going back in your pocket. So vehicles is a great illustration of that, because every month you are driving a car that you already own. It's like giving yourself the several $100s that you would have put towards a car payment. So I think it makes a lot of sense to hold on to cars as long as possible, and even if that means occasionally repairing them. Over the summer, I spent more than $6,000 repairing a car, which seems crazy, right? Repairing a car it was a 2012 Toyota Prius, and so at this point it's 12 years old. It's not a new car. I put $6,000 into it because I think I can get another 100,000 miles out of it. I think I can drive it another 5 or 6 years, but the head gasket blew and it needed some work. So I'm just going to keep the things that I've already got as long as possible. So avoiding unnecessary spending also extends to not being tempted by something that's a good deal. Anybody heard of the website called Slick Deals? Few people. So it's just a website that there's no rhyme or reason to the things that they have on there, other than it's just things that are at a huge discount. So it's got computers, it's got protein bars, it's got airline tickets, just anything that's like a really good deal is on this website. And it's tempting to buy things that I don't need sometimes just because it's a good deal, but 40% off shouldn't incentivize you to buy something that you don't actually need. Because if you don't buy that thing, it's like getting 100% off. So don't be tempted by a sale, and don't let just a sale be the reason that you buy a thing. Only buy things if you actually need them. And if you are frugal on all of the things that don't really excite you, then you can afford to be just lavish with what really matters to you. So in my life, the lavish thing is travel. I will not economize when it comes to travel. I love going on trips. I do economize a little. I'm not going to fly first class places. That's crazy. But if there's a trip I want to go on, I'm going to take the trip, and I can afford it because I drive an old car, I live in a small house, I don't buy expensive clothes. But what I really value is travel. And you'll probably have similar things as well that mean a lot to you. and you should economize in all of those other categories as well. Finally, hedonistic adaptation is the idea that you get accustomed to luxury, and then luxury doesn't feel like a luxury once you've had it for a few years, and then you need something even more fancy next time. So you need to recognize that in yourself, that when you start making money and getting a raise, you'll start to spend that raise, and then you just get adapted to the luxuries in life, and then suddenly you're spending 2 or 3 times more than you used to, and you're getting about the same amount of emotional value out of all of that spending as when you had relatively lower standards. So you should avoid that, and one of the great ways to avoid hedonistic adaptation is just to, anytime you get a raise, take the extra money you're earning and invest it. Rather than spending the extra amount, just have them withdraw even more from your checking account and having it go to your brokerage. Last slide of the semester. People sometimes buy a bigger house than they need just because they can afford it, and I think it's better just to get the smallest house that you're comfortable in, and then you'll save all of the extra money. Some of the best advice I got was to pay my credit card every month in full, because if you avoid the high interest rates of credit card, then you'll always have more money. And saving isn't as gratifying as spending money and having a new TV or having a new vehicle, but when you save money, you're buying freedom for yourself, and you're buying opportunities for the people that you care about. So I encourage you to focus on the freedom and opportunities that savings will give you, and spending money doesn't always give you the same opportunities for the future as saving money does. Now lastly, just the more time you spend thinking about your finances and learning about it, the better off you'll be. The people who have the most money, they generally spend time each month thinking about it and managing it and looking at it and keeping track of it. So you don't need to fixate on it. Don't let it rule your life. But I think it makes sense to pay attention to your money. All right. So the semester's over. You've got a final a week from today. If you've got any questions between now and then, feel free to send me an email, and I'll be glad to get back with you. Thanks for a great semester.